Depression, and there were hardly any jobs in Maine, but primarily agriculture towns. I mean, the state was agriculture, not much going on. You either had to be a lumberjack or work on a farm. We moved many times, so I was probably in a half a dozen different schools in my first 8 years. Everybody went to school. We all had to walk to school. There were no buses. There was a lot of kids that never went to high school. I went to a year and a half high school. I had to drop out to support the family during the Depression, which a lot of kids did in those days. In 1932, because my father lost his job at that time, he was working in a barrel factory, a potato barrel factory. He lost his job because business went down, and we had to move from Prescott, where I was born, to Ashland to live on our relatives or a friend's farm. 50–60% of people in town barely had enough money to live on. Like 1933, 1934, my father worked for a farmer that owned a small grocery store in Ashland. He also owned a farm, and my father worked the farm, and he could stay on the farm and work it as long as he bought everything that he earned at the store, things that the guy didn't have at the store. I don't know how much money he actually gave my father, but it would be small amount, maybe $5 a month.
Wow.
To buy things that the store didn't have. That would be like probably medicine or that kind of stuff. And I would have been 10, 11. I started picking potatoes. You start picking potatoes around the beginning of the school year, and it goes into the frost hits the ground, which is about the middle of October. So most of us kids were pulled out of school 4 to 6 weeks. And then I continued to pick until I left Maine, went to New Brunswick to live in the 10th grade. They paid us 3 cents a barrel of potatoes, and a barrel of potatoes weighed 165 pounds. And the average person could probably pick 60 or 70 barrels a day, less than $2 a day. When we would buy 100-pound sack of flour, 100-pound sack of sugar, and dried beans and all that kinds of stuff that would stay for the winter without being in refrigeration. And we burned wood for heating and cooking. So we did all that stuff and paid for all that stuff in the fall when we had the money from picking potatoes. And we survived the winter. The wages during that period for people that did common labor work, and that was my father's description, would be 25 cents an hour. I had a paper route. I would pick berries, and two of my brothers and I split wood and carried this wood up to this lady's house. Upstairs, she lived on the second floor. We carried it, and she gave us $1 a week between us. 33 cents a week. But we could buy a lot with 33 cents. We rented a apartment rather, shared a bathroom. We had 3 rooms and a hallway for 7 of us. So we had a kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms. And my sister slept in the hallway, and we had to share a bath with somebody else. It didn't seem hard from my point of view. We always had enough food to eat. We just didn't have any spending money. We'd pass our clothing down from one to the other. And we had 1 used bike between 5 of us. But most of the kids in those days just played with each other and did all kinds of games like that. And maybe we would get 1 game, or we would play cards. We entertained ourselves. The majority of people that we hung around with were in the same boat we were, so we didn't know any different.
You just thought it was normal?
Just thought it was normal. We never missed it, we never had it, so we did with what we had. And the province we moved back to, New Brunswick, wasn't too well off at that time either, and they were just recovering from the Depression. So things weren't really good either in Maine or New Brunswick economically up in that part of the country, except when the war started. In Prescott, I went to high school a year and a half, and then when all the kids moved into Canada, we had to switch from US system to Canadian system. Out of the 6 of us, 3 of us had to drop out. We just couldn't make the school. We couldn't cut it.
Were you one of the ones that dropped out?
Yep. I joined the Army.
In Canada?
Within 3 months, I joined the US Navy. I hate to say it, but going from the Depression to the US Navy was like going from heck, pardon the expression, to heaven. They got paid,
That's what
they
they
got
did?
clothes, they got fed. Everything was great. Me on a personal basis, I had more money and more wherewithal being in the Navy than I did in New Brunswick in Canada during the Depression, because I was getting paid by the U.S. Navy. And I never thought much about it, because as a family, we had a warm house and food, and maybe the clothing was used and old, but none of us wanted for anything. I never really thought the Depression was horrible. No, a good point to make. I was living in Maine and New Brunswick while the Depression was going on, but the Depression was really got hit hard in the United States in the Midwest because they had what they call the Dust Bowls. Dust Bowls where there was no rain for months and months at a time, and the land would just dry up and the crops would fail. We're up in Maine. We didn't have a shortage of rain and water, so everything was growing and everything was good up there. So we didn't feel the Depression in Maine and New Brunswick anywhere near what they felt it in the Midwest. The sum up of my feeling of the Depression wasn't anywhere near what the Midwest was. So most of the movies like Grapes of Wrath center around the center part of the Depression, which was really bad. People had to just pick up their boots and housing and clothing and just move to wherever there was a job. We didn't have to do that. We did move around for jobs, but we stayed within 100 miles of where we lived.
Oh.
You can do with a whole lot less. As long as you have the basics, a house, clothing, and food, which we did. We just didn't have the luxuries. We had no refrigerator, no car, one bike, and I never got an allowance from my mother and father because they had no money. I think most families got closer together.
Anything else you want to say? Is that it?
It's hard to talk about my parents like that. Wow, I'm just like I'm living it. My mother and father played game after game after game after game. We had one radio, one bike. So the radio, we had our set programs, what they were. We all crowd around and listen to the radio. And most of our times were good because we were a close-knit family.